Hi, I'm Randy Robison. Welcome to the special digital edition of Life Today. I'm here with Will Graham, and to put that in context, you've heard of Billy Graham. He is actually William Franklin Graham Jr., and then you've heard of Franklin Graham. He's actually William Franklin Graham III. Well, I've got Will Graham, who is William Franklin Graham IV.
I know that's a mouthful.
That's good, but you go by Will, and
Yeah.
your dad goes by Franklin. Of course, we all know Billy Graham and all that. Just quickly, I don't want to spend the whole time on this, but give me that whole sense of family.
There's actually 5 generations of us now. I have
You
a
have a
son.
son?
He's
Okay.
William Franklin Graham V, but we run out of nicknames.
Yeah?
He's 13 years old, but we call him, he's William Franklin Graham V. We call him Quinn.
Quinn.
Quinn
Yep.
means
Yep,
5.
There you go.
And so he's a great boy. He's very smart. Got 2 daughters also. They're older. My oldest is going off to college very soon. And so I'm a little bit nervous about that. That's going to be a new endeavor for that. My wife and I, we just celebrated 20 years of marriage.
Congratulations.
And so God's been extremely good to us. And I got 2 brothers and a sister. A lot of people would know my sister. She's Sissy Lynch. She's on TV a lot more than any of us. She's better to look at. And but it's great growing up with my father, Franklin Graham, and then my granddad, Billy Graham. I've been very blessed.
All right. So now I know who you are in the family. Who are you? Who is Will Graham?
Well, I'm an evangelist. I work for the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. Gave my life on January 11th, 1981, during a communion service. Well, it wasn't during communion, but that's what prompted it. I wanted communion. It was my first time in grown-up church because I was in children's church. It was the new year, so they kind of kicked me out, and I had to go to big church.
Right.
And I was in big church, and I was wanting snacks, and it was Communion Sunday, which I didn't know what communion was.
Right.
I just saw grape juice and bread. I was like, this is the best snacks ever. And when it came by, Dad kind of slapped my hand, not in a mean way, but nuh-uh. And I thought he was afraid I was going to spill it on the carpet of the church. I didn't think much of it, and I was just disappointed I couldn't have snacks like everybody else. Later that day, Dad took me up to my room and explained to me why I couldn't have communion and explained the gospel to me. And when I was real young, I didn't understand everything in the Bible. I knew that I loved Jesus, I wanted to be with him, and I knew that I wasn't perfect.
That's enough for a kid and for an adult.
It is, and I gave my life to Christ that day. And so I've grown up in the Graham family. I always wanted to be in ministry. I thought I was going to be honest, I thought I was going to be a missionary, missionary aviator. And I want to be like my dad. I fly airplanes and tell people about Christ and Liberty. I went to Liberty University, and while I was at Liberty, I preached my first sermon, and I got my pilot's license. But I don't really fly myself. I fly Delta about everywhere now, so Delta takes me to go preach. But I preach for the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. I also run part of our ministry called The Cove, the Billy Graham Training Center in Asheville, North Carolina. It's a beautiful place. It's like a retreat center, about 1,200 acres. It's gorgeous. I manage that and a couple of other little bit smaller ministries that we run. And I've been very blessed to be a part of what my granddaddy helped start over, since 1950.
Sure. And on top of all that, you found time to write this devotional.
Well, it is. And what's interesting, it's my first book. I've never written a book. A lot of people had asked me to write a book, and I wanted to, but God told me no. I wouldn't, God said, not now, not now.
Right.
And so I kind of put it off, and I said, in due time, God will let me. And I was a pastor for a while. Pastored a church in Raleigh, North Carolina. Was in right after seminary. I pastored a church. Loved it. Never wanted to be a pastor, but I was going to take all these things I learned in my sermons and put them in a devotional book. And so I was kind of ready for it. But then I did a movie I filmed it in 2017. It came out in 2018.
Yeah.
It was about the Louis Zamperini story. Unbroken, Path to Redemption. I was in, playing the role of my grandfather. And it was during this time that between the shooting and the editing that God said, I want you to start writing. And so we started writing all my sermons. I looked at them, I was like, man, these were pretty bad way back then. Because that was, a long time ago,
Right.
15, 20 years ago. And so now I started working on some things I sing that God's shown to me in my life, examples of Christ-likeness in other people, my granddaddy.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to write about those.
I was going to say that because it's not just sermons. This is you. You poured a lot of yourself in there, a lot of your what God's shown you through the years in there.
Right.
What do you think people will take away from that?
Well, first and foremost, it's not a book about Will Graham. This is what God
Right.
is doing.
Right.
And so I want them to see what God is doing and how God can work in their life too. Just like God worked in whoever I'm writing about or the things I've seen, God can do it to them. And also for those who are believers to challenge them to be more active in evangelism, to share their faith, to be praying for lost people. And I wish we did as a church, as a collective church, I wish we did more evangelism, in a sense of we need to be more evangelistic. I heard a great sermon here in this town a number of years ago when I was speaking at a conference here. And it was a pastor got up and said, Southern Baptists have perfected the art of strutting while sitting down. Right. And talking about evangelism. We talk a big game about evangelism, but we hardly ever do it personally. And I want to challenge people in their personal walk on how to share their faith.
What's the future of Billy Graham Evangelistic Association?
It's interesting, since my grandfather retired, 2005 was his last crusade that he did on his own up in Fleshy Meadows, New York. To be honest, my dad's been running it before that, and he's been running it ever since. And we've seen more people come to know Christ and during those years under my dad than we saw in all 60 years of my granddaddy combined.
Why is that?
Technology. And technology has allowed us to go into places that we've never been able to go to. And my granddaddy was right on the back. He was just getting out of ministry when the internet was coming alive.
Right. Yeah.
Now he did some of the very first stuff on the internet. And with Steve Case that is, at AOL, he was able to actually go online before you and I probably even had AOL and talk to people about faith. So my granddad was using the internet, but it was right at the end of his life, so he didn't get really involved in it. Yeah. But that has allowed my father and I to go into places and use technology in a far greater way than my granddaddy ever could to reach more people. And so BJ is extremely busy. We're preaching all around the world. This year next month, I'll be in Manila. In 2019, February 2019, I'll be in Manila. I have 2 in the United States in 2019. That will be I got 2 cities in Montana, and then I'll be going to Hawaii. Now, I know what people are going to say, Hawaii, I'm not the beach guy. I'm the guy that likes the cold weather.
I was going to say, I'd rather have Montana than Hawaii.
And I'll be going to the Arctic Circle later this year in Canada in Baker Lake, which is far north. It's actually the geographical center of Canada, but it's right at the Arctic Circle.
Wow.
I'll be preaching there in October. So I'm hoping for cold weather there. But I go where God wants me to go, and I love going to places where no one else has gone before to proclaim the good news of Christ.
Okay, so you sound like your granddaddy in a lot of ways. In a lot of
that's
great
a good
ways.
thing.
It's a compliment, yes.
Okay.
Was there ever a moment where it had to become your faith?
Definitely. Growing, just because I'm Billy Graham's grandson, if anyone deserved a free pass, all right, you would think Billy Graham had earned a couple free tickets to get into heaven, right? Yeah, for family members that needed it. I could have been one of them. But that's not the case. The old saying, God has children, but not grandchildren. We've heard that saying a lot, and that's very much true. You have to make your faith your own. I grew up with a mom and a dad that loved Jesus. I was born in a Christian home. I had Christian grandparents on both sides. So everything was a positive influence in my life. I went to a public high school and public elementary, and it was all positive peer pressure. I'm one of the few guys that didn't have, like our high school was actually good. It was cool to be the Christian. I mean, you don't see this much. I mean, it was very abnormal, you might say, compared to what a lot of people go through. But it was during those high school years when I was spending more time by myself or with others, that is. I'm not being with my mom and dad. I want to socialize.
Sure.
And I was blessed to have good friends that were Christians that, we could study our Bibles together. We could talk about spiritual things. And that's when my faith was becoming my own. And also through college and stuff like that, I really had to make it my own.
Liberty didn't just completely corrupt you?
Well, no, not yet. But I tell you, one thing that Liberty did, 2 things that Liberty provided for me. Well, 3 things. One was they gave me an education. Second, and one of the biggest things was I fell in love with the Scriptures. I had a teacher there that just opened up God's Word, and I was like a sponge. I knew all this stuff. but it was like a whole new, excitement about studying the scriptures I never had before, and I was really soaking it in. And then I met my wife, so that was probably the greatest thing I got out of Liberty. So grateful, godly wife.
I found mine at Oral Roberts University.
That's another great school.
So yeah, I
Great
understand. So good to sit down and talk with you. Love what you're doing. What's the website for people that want to kind of keep up and see what all's going on?
Well, you can go to the BGA website. We have a bookstore called Ruth's Attic, and you can go there and you can order that book, or you can get it really at any bookstore, Amazon or whatever. You can get it from there as well.
Yep, and catches preaching dates depending on where you're at. You could even be in the Arctic Circle and see him.
That's right.
So that's pretty impressive. Appreciate your time. Check out the book. It's in stores now. Share it with your friends after you finish reading it, and check out the website. And the legacy continues, and it's all for God's glory. Thank you for watching and sharing this interview. Be sure to check out the social media for Life Today Television, and you can connect with me on Facebook and Twitter. And if you haven't already subscribed or followed this channel, do it now so you can see more of our great guests.